Hello and welcome to Stingray Tom's Florida and another cemetery story. Today's video will answer the question, why does Stingray Tom like cemeteries so darn much? So firstly, the overall subject of my YouTube channel is Florida tourism history. On the surface, it may appear that talking about cemeteries really isn't on topic. But there are actually several reasons why tourism and cemeteries are related, especially in Florida. Broadly defined, a tourist attraction is simply a place that attracts tourists. Sure, places that were designed to be attractions, such as Disney World and Weeki Wachee, are obvious examples, but so are national and state parks, even those that are public lands that have been kept as close to nature as possible. Historic places, such as old houses and former indigenous settlements, are also attractions, even though their primary function is to preserve history, not entertain people. At least some Florida cemeteries fall within that final category as well. Filled with history, nature, and drama, even small cemeteries have many stories to tell. While the typical Florida cemetery isn't a place any regular tourist would ever go, there is still much to see in most of them that speaks to many unique qualities of the state. So there are maybe 3 types of cemeteries in Florida that would be considered to be tourist attractions. The first is those that are historically important in and of themselves. This generally includes the oldest cemeteries in Florida's oldest cities, including 2 cemeteries in St. Augustine, the Huguenot and Tolomato cemeteries, as well as Tallahassee's Old City Cemetery, St. Michael's Cemetery in Pensacola, and the Key West Cemetery. The second type are those cemeteries that are historically interesting because of the nature of some of their burials. St. Augustine's National Cemetery, which includes the remains of soldiers who died in the Dade Massacre, is a good example, as are any of the other cemeteries that are resting places of famous people. The third category has to do with cemeteries that are simply unusual or are beautiful in some way. This can include those with interesting grave markers, be it their method of construction, composition, or even their message. You can see my video on the Woodmen of the World tree stump markers in Florida cemeteries for an example. It can also be the very nature of the way people are interred. Because of Florida's water table, some of its cemeteries have a large number of above-ground interments. Also, some cemeteries contain interesting mausoleums and other architectural features. It can include interesting features that are unrelated to the graves. For example, the large number of unique birdhouses that are found in the Oak Ridge Cemetery in Madison. There are others that present themselves as beautiful parks. Greenwood Cemetery in Orlando not only has some gently rolling hills, something that's not common in Orlando, it's connected with a wetlands park that is a great wildlife viewing area. Florida cemeteries are evocative. They are beautiful, strange, sad, and even funny. I've spent many hours in several hundred Florida cemeteries, so if you'd rather not visit them, at least you can view the history and beauty through the lens of my camera and my descriptions. I have several objectives when visiting cemeteries. 1. I look for the oldest grave markers. Often there's little public information on cemeteries. There are a couple of websites that are dedicated to cemeteries around the U.S., but while most cemeteries are listed on these pages, they often don't include information such as the date a cemetery was founded, who manages the cemetery, or even the address. Finding the oldest grave marker is usually a fairly accurate way of determining the age of the cemetery. It's fascinating to see some of the graves that date from the founding, though sometimes this is actually hard to do, especially in the older cemeteries in Florida. Early graves may no longer have their markers because the climate here is hard on stone, metal, and especially wood. 2. I look for the graves of famous individuals, if there are any. Now, few Florida cemeteries are the resting places for movie stars, sports heroes, or famous musicians, but many have markers for the first local settlers and important politicians. Of course, it helps to know a little bit about the history of the area to find these people. Three. This might be the most fun. As common as professionally made markers are, many cemeteries have homemade markers as well as professional ones that are unique in telling the life story of the individual. I'm constantly surprised at the creativity expressed to honor loved ones. Sometimes the artistic nature of the deceased or their loved ones comes out in the choice of marker. Also, I look for markers that appear to have been made by an amateur, not a stone carver or company that makes markers or memorials. Not only are these markers unique, they display fascinating elements that are likely to be never found on professionally made markers. 4. I always look for as much nature as possible. It's pretty easy. Lots of birds call cemeteries home, and they are great places to look for insects, lizards, and the occasional armadillo, raccoon, and opossum. And don't forget the flowers and the trees. Also, I'm always interested in how well maintained the cemeteries are. Some are sadly neglected, and others are groomed to what seems to be an excessive level. Most are somewhere in between. Nearly all have grass, but for various reasons the grass isn't exactly lush, so there's a lot of sand and dirt around the markers. Some have paved roads, some are dirt, and some have wider grassy areas that allow visitors to drive around the cemetery. Every cemetery is a little different from every other. I also enjoy talking with the staff, usually the groundskeeper, as it's very common for them to consider their work to be more than just a job. They are providing a valuable service to the interred, to their loved ones, and even history. The groundskeepers can also point me in the direction of interesting burials. I've even had some offer to drive me around their cemetery in a golf cart to show it off. I want to note some simple guidelines which I follow when visiting a cemetery that may help you as well. I approach the grounds with a great deal of respect. Cemeteries and burial grounds aren't parks. They're places where people honor their loved ones and even perform religious ceremonies. I'm there to learn and experience. I only drive on what are clearly areas a cemetery allows cars. There are plenty of cemeteries in Florida that have areas where people are buried, but there's no visible markers. Driving directly across an empty field may actually be driving across dozens of graves of some of Florida's earliest settlers. I generally leave grave markers alone. As much as I want to take a fallen marker and place it back upright, I don't really think that's appropriate. I wouldn't want to take the risk of breaking it. Besides, just setting it back up may not fix the issue, and the marker could just fall over once again. What I do occasionally is move away grass or dirt or leaves from markers so that I can photograph them. Also, not that I'd want to, but I certainly don't take rubbings of headstones. Many cemeteries have rules against doing that as it can damage the markers. I hope this gives you an insight as to why I love exploring cemeteries. Hopefully it will inspire you to explore them as well. As time goes on, I'll be adding more videos under the title Cemetery Stories. I hope they'll be interesting for people. Thank you again for watching another of Stingray Tom's videos. I hope you liked it. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. Stingray Tom's Florida, traveling through time around the Sunshine State.